what is it you do for a living? What's the problem your company you're trying to solve in the world?
No, I'd be happy to. So Altana, where I'm chief science officer and one of the co-founders, is a value chain management system, by which I mean a system to manage everything from the extraction of the raw materials to the distribution of the final goods. We base it on an AI harmonized map of the global supply chain that is the largest that exists, covering billions of companies, hundreds of millions of companies, billions of transactions, and on top of that, serve use cases around some of the most pressing issues of our time. That includes compliance, forced labor, deforestation, economic security, insurance against disruption, sourcing procurement. I could go on. So we serve a mix of the public and private sector across a variety of different governments and large multinational corporations. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right.
Right.
Lou, you're next.
Yeah, happy to. Hi, everyone. I'm Zhang. I'm the founder and managing partner of a Fusion Fund. We're an early stage VC firm based in Palo Alto, been investing across United States and Canada in the past 10 years. The three verticals we mainly focus on, including enterprise AI. Since 2015, we also do healthcare. The last vertical is industry automation, especially how to bring the vertical AI digital solution to the traditional sector, including supply chain logistic. And before I start Fusion Fund, I was an entrepreneur. I built and sold my company, went through the miserable founder life and goes through from the beginning to the end. After I sold my company and a year later, I started Fusion Fund. Really want to support founder program from the beginning to the end. So now we're investing out from our Fund 4. We have lots of fresh dry powder. We just announced last week, $190 million fund. Total AUM is a little bit over $500 million now.
And Daniel.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for this great audience. Thank you everyone for being here. So we run Choco, and so Choco's mission is to remove food wastage out of the food supply chain, and we do it by bringing all actors of the supply chain from the very beginning, being the farm, over all of the distribution parts, down to the final part, like restaurants and retail, on one platform. We identify kind of a waste is happening, and then we're trying to reduce it. We've been doing this for 7 years, and we're active across all of the US, Europe, and the Middle East, and we power around 50% of food trade in some of the major cities across the US, like LA, New York, but also across London, Paris, and many other places.
So food supply chains are super complicated. The only one I fully understand is the little spinach plants I have growing out back, which somehow survived the winter in Virginia. Where do you get all the data to assemble this so you can actually try to optimize, which is this incredibly complicated long distance system that starts maybe in the Central Valley of California and ends in a supermarket shelf in New York or wherever?
Yeah, so I think in the end of the day, you just have to choose one part of the chain, and then you get the data from that part, and then you go next. So I give you an example. So the value of food kind of increases the further it goes in the chain. So the spinach that you have been referring to has the smallest value at the farm and has the highest value at the restaurant or on the supermarket. And food is a buyer's market, right? Because it's hyper commoditized and there's oversupply, that we have so much waste in the first place. And so what we did is we just started at the very end of it. So if the retailers and restaurants of the world, we provide them a tool, we understand where they're buying from. Once you understand where they buy from, you go to them, which are the food distributors. And then you go to the food distributors and you provide them workflow tools that help them kind of in the day-to-day operations. You understand everywhere they're buying from, so all of the farms, all the lead times, the products they're getting, and then you understand everywhere they're selling to. And so you kind of go step by step. And I think because of that nature and because of that playbook, I think that AI is actually the perfect technology to solve such kind of problems. Because so the data in food obviously is highly unstructured and highly unstandardized. So how does a distributor buy the spinach from California is completely different than how they buy a mango from southern Brazil or cheese from France. And so there's going to be many different formats, be it in voice and calls and emails and text and stuff like that. And AI can just take any kind of unstructured data format and with a bit of training kind of structure it. And so I think that is kind of the playbook going step by step to actually get this data.
Yeah, and just to build on this point, which I completely agree with, using AI just to structure and understand what's happening is incredibly powerful, and you can harmonize then. I was just looking at the stats. There are trillions of dollars in flows of food around the world each year, And then if you look at the actual number of shipments, you're talking about processing records and harmonizing them, if you're trying to do it at that scale, in the tens of millions of records to process each year. Additionally, however, what I wanted to emphasize was the actual, we were talking about this backstage, how food serves as an input into other industries, of course, too.
Yeah.
Cosmetics, fuel, chemicals, all of that. And so AI is a great application also to understand programmatically at scale what goes into what, the input-output relationships, and then the dependencies that exist both within the food supply chain as it gains value, but also as it feeds other value chains.
Yeah, I do want to add in here because we look at lots of companies try to use the AI as a digital superpower to kind of supercharge the traditional sector, including food supply chain. But both two other panelists mentioned, it's very fragmented, it's very unstructured data, it's also operational heavy. So require founder not only need to have domain expertise about AI, but also need to understand the different players within this complex process, be able to design the solution easy to integrate. This is different from Silicon Valley that everything uploaded all the data to the cloud. Your solution need to work with different type of infrastructure in order to get people aligned in interest and be able to use it. But once the integration is done and the supercharge could be happen within short period of time. I have a portfolio company. They're now making $2.5 billion revenue. They're using AI for food supply chain. They do also have a practice that acquired a traditional boutique supply, like food supply chain company, and bundle with their AI solution. They'll be able to turn around 2 or 3 this type of small merge acquisition from losing money to profitability within 2 or 3 months. But the solution won't be the most fancy AI solution from Silicon Valley. Will be something really easy to integrate hardware, software layer, and also run on Prime, be able to engage with all the existing players to move from there.
Well, thinking about the actual work of agriculture, how much of this data collection is it people in the field with a device? How much of this was impossible 10, 15 years ago when we didn't have these little distraction machines in our pockets?
100%. And then the regulatory requirement just keeps going up. If you look at like the deforestation regulation in Europe, the requirements for import into the EU require understanding plot level information across the value chain. So not just the food, but also like look at coffee beans. Coffee bean is then harvested and roasted. Even if you bring it in roasted, you still need to understand what plot it came from as currently written. So the need for the AI solutions just continues to grow.
I think we also got an ironic situation because of COVID, certainly push lots of this traditional sector, not only just using Excel, essentially using handwriting papers to take down others' data, so has to move to the digital format, digital platform, which also help us now with better, faster, integration of AI for the food supply chain or even global supply chain industry.
And Daniel, to what extent have you been able to benefit from all these advances? I have to throw 5G into a conversation at some point, that you can push out intelligence into these edge devices.
Excuse me? That
you can push out intelligence into these edge devices. So it's not people either taking notes on paper or on a device that then have to get synced somewhere else.
So look, I think kind of the supply chain shocks like COVID, they certainly help to understand how fragile the supply chain is. I think up until COVID, everyone just took supply chains for granted. And every time you walk into a store, there was food. And then COVID happened and suddenly there was no food and there was also no toilet paper.
All the toilet paper trees, no one was taking
care
of them.
All of the toilet paper trees have been deforested, they're all gone. But so apparently supply chains are not that resilient. And so I think that helped to kind of change mindset in food supply chain. Okay, we should adapt new tools and we should be open to new technology and everything that can potentially help us. And I think that's kind of one tailwind. But I think there's another tailwind, and a tailwind. So like the food system is the largest employer on the planet. It's massive. So we have around 400 million people in farming. Farming is the largest employer on the planet as a category. But the problem within food supply chain is a very margin thin business. And it tends to be a very tough business just as an employer, as a job. It's very tough. It's usually night shifts. You work with food in refrigerated rooms, only during the night. Everything is wet and cold, and it's kind of it's badly paid as well. And so it's very hard to attract labor into that market. And so I think that market has a has a dire need for automation.
Yeah.
Just to keep on increasing productivity by having actually less labor in the future.
Yeah, so let's talk. Can y'all give me some examples of how you were able to apply AI to either reduce consumption of things like water or fertilizer or weed killer, or improve throughput quality at the other end?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So we use it for all of those purposes. And if you think about the first of those, just reducing environmental impact, things like, as I was referring to earlier, the deforestation regulation, we partner with another company that is Epoch, that is fundamentally looking at and able to sense remotely, according to the criteria, where deforestation is taking place. By binding that to the value chain, you can then avoid deforestation regions, comply with regulation to import food into Europe, and food derivative products.
We're talking about
et cetera.
synthesizing data from a satellite to what's on the ground.
Yeah, bind it from satellite to the ground to the supply chain, tack. And that's the type of automation we're talking about. Sourcing and procurement is similar, but we also work on economic security and insurance. And what that looks like is actually understanding bottlenecks, understanding resiliency, being able to have resilient supply chains that actually can provide food at national scale, even in the case of disruption. And so if you think about what happened, for example, during the pandemic or during previous food crises, and why I think your work is so cool, is that actually understanding demand-supply relationships becomes really key when things are disrupted. So being able to proactively understand that and plan for bottlenecks and then actually adjust as necessary, that's definitely something that we work on. It sounds like you're working on as well. And it's from the micro to the macro. And you can certainly make it more efficient as you do that. There's a lot of inefficiencies in the system. But I think as we live in this age of fragmentation, AI, to understand this complexity at scale and make it resilient, is a first order importance.
Yeah. Dan, do you have any examples you can share about specific cases where you took a look at an industry sector or something and we determined we can use X% less of this or that, or get Y% more of that on the other end? What was the insight that AI yielded?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. So my favorite example is the strawberry. It's a favorite example because everyone loves strawberries, and most people have seen a strawberry farm sometime in their life. But if you kind of imagine a strawberry farm, and you kind of picture it, I would dare to assume that you don't picture a refrigeration system on that farm.
I do.
Yeah, you do.
We're all normal here.
And so, and that is because in reality there's no refrigeration systems at these farms. But the difference of cooling a strawberry up to 1 hour after harvest. So by harvest, I mean really ripping the strawberry off from the green, and cooling it 6 hours later is nearly a 5x difference in shelf life. Which means you have much more time to transport it. You have more time to consume it before the shelf life before it perishes, and before you got to throw it away. And so the question is, how do you identify these kind of patterns, and how do you let the farmer know that, hey, actually, if you would invest into this refrigeration, then your product becomes more valuable and you may charge more for it. And I think being able to connect those dots throughout the chain, that a farmer actually can see longer into the chain and can say, hey, look, my products actually stay longer on your shelves, kind of connecting with one platform. That's where AI can help.
Can it also tell the company further down, these strawberries, you should probably turn these into jam right now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So Lou, you have to look at a lot of companies trying to optimize supply chains. When somebody's coming to you with a pitch, we want to take this industry vertical and make it more efficient, what tells you if they have enough data to make that possible, or whether they're just using AI and a lot of hand waving to say, please give us some money?
Yeah, of course, now AI is such a cool buzzword. Everyone's saying they're either building AI or they're integrated AI. But essentially, what you mentioned is critical. Whether they have a data library will define whether they could build an efficient small model and also have high accuracy solution provided to the customer. So for us, we always talk to founder first is to see whether they have access to high quality industry data. And partially maybe founder have unique knowledge and access, they could build out their own library, but most of the case, they be able to partner up with some large player from the beginning to use their potential customers' data to fine-tune their model and take it from there to build up their data library. And when we talk about the data, it's not only means volume only matters. Yes, huge amount really matters, but quality of the data matters more. But how to define the quality of the data? And it's very scattered, it's very unstructured data, how to streamline the data, be able to curate it in a way. So we even see some company doing data curation. That's a big market in order to make the data training data library more efficient. Also relate to that, the reason we want to work with founder, curate a high quality data set, also because that's a foundation for them to build a small model. For supply chain industry, essentially, I don't think it will work. You just build on top of a ChatGPT API because the cost is way too high. But the small vertical model means it consumes limited GPU, limited energy, give the possibility to run the AI on the edge devices. All these sensors, all this machine, the food industry, in the supply chain, they're edge devices. And we want to have the future of AI is AI on the edge devices run on local with the local prime data. So that's kind of the thing we've been looking at when we're talking to founder. If they just came in saying that we're going to call this API, quickly build it up, I don't think so, because eventually it's the profit margin. And if the AI is not affordable for industry and the food industry is not a high margin business fundamentally, that won't work.
So yeah, you two gentlemen, is that where you're seeing this? Are you working on just smaller and smaller models? Are you looking towards the future of AI that lives at the edge?
Yeah. So, I mean, we do focus a little bit on the edge through the type of thing I just talked about with deforestation, but in general, we're deploying out into major corporations and governments. We're not looking at things where you're as limited as you are at the edge. That said, because of the volumes of data we're processing, billions of records, as I said, hundreds of millions of companies, very large scale networks, just the cost to run a model becomes actually quite high. And so we use a variety of different models, both to construct this network representation, this digital twin or knowledge graph, and then generate insight upon it, where if you're calling an API, just wouldn't scale in time or cost.
Exactly.
And we found a lot of benefit to actually going and fine-tuning models that combine both language and graph information. And those are going to be smaller models than you might see back in like a ChatGPT. But the advantage of that, to your point about what's so exciting about this moment, is you really do have the opportunity to, if you fine-tune it on specialized data, make something that's actually still best in class.
Exactly.
And so that's certainly what we've found in a variety of applications in the supply chain space.
Yeah, I would highly agree to that. And also, I think it's actually not possible to generalize it, because there's always going to be some commodity tasks that you actually want a large language model to do because they're just the best in it. Like, I think no application layer company should build their own text to voice or transcription service or translation service and kind of many other. I think this we should just take from the large models, pay for it because they're literally investing billions in it. And by the way, the prices kind of decreased 10x year over year. So then, but this also means that there's no value in them, right? Because it's a commodity and everyone can take them. And so then it comes like kind of to your own model, and where that needs to be a small language model, or whether it can be kind of like a neural net or a machine learning algorithm. Let's see, but kind of the power comes when you build your own layer on top of an LLM that learns. Because no matter how much data we're going to create from our users, from the supply chain, OpenAI or Anthropic or Mistral, it's never going to learn from it. And it might even not want it to learn from it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's always going to be a combination. It's like you buy the commodity task and then you build your own neural network on top that actually learns and gets better.
So can you give me that's interesting. Give me an example of where you had to sort of do that to get a question answered that you weren't going to get using the library you were already using.
Yeah. So let's take an example. So let's speak of a large fish distributor in Boston. Okay, so Boston has some of the largest fish distributors in this country. And so when a restaurant orders with them or a retailer orders with them, then they might just pick up the phone and they leave them a voicemail, and they're gonna say, I need like 200 pounds of fish, and they're like hang up. And so even on ChatGPT 5 won't know what this particular restaurant wants when they order fish.
Yeah.
Right. And so you will have to build your own learning algorithm that understands this kind of restaurant with that kind of menu at that particular point in time with that particular person ordering. When they mean fish, they actually mean salmon. And when they mean salmon, what they actually mean is they mean the frozen sous vide salmon that comes in the whatever in the 20 kilogram box.
Yep.
So that kind of learning, irrespective of how smart kind of the foundational layer models become, they'll never know that. And so that learning that you have to provide, and maybe on the first time it doesn't know, and I think then you just have to provide like a good user interface to the actual user that can teach it. Oh, when this customer says fish, what it actually means, it means a sous vide salmon, whatever. So the next time it can match it. And that's, in my opinion, actually also the winning formula, because we always say about like industry, okay, shit data in, shit data out. But the reality is if you manage, and so that's the reality for many industries, but if you manage to build an interface that makes it really simple for the industry to actually label the data as part of the regular day-to-day process, then you're kind of creating your own data treasure cove that actually was not there before. And I think that is an important playbook of getting these old unstructured industries. And it's in particular important, again, for food. So food is not only the largest industry, but it's obviously the oldest industry. I mean, we've been eating forever. And so many of these players in the industries have been around forever. And by forever, I mean, not forever, but there's many companies that have 50 to 150 years old history, and most of them are actually family run, owned and managed. And so their data might not even be in a way that you can just digitize it. So you kind of just give them a workflow tool and you kind of structure data as you go.
So that's how you turn an LLM into a foodie.
Yeah.
Good. One other thing we talked about before, food supply chains, they're not just affected by climate and what grows where and the logistics of getting it from place to place, government actions. Tariffs lately have been in the news a lot. They're up, they're down, they're pulled back, they're put back in place. And this is all happening very quickly. How do you factor for something like that in your supply chain model?
Yeah, as you're correctly bringing up, we live in an age of two disruptions. One is the disruption of AI, which is this advanced technology to handle complexity at scale. The second is the fragmentation of the current global system. Tariffs is an example of this. And what's so important about tariffs is that they impact across the multiple tiers of the food production system. So it's not just foodstuffs, but it's actually inputs like potash, the fertilizer inputs that go into, for example, US production of pretty much everything, but often come from Canada. So as you think about,
I don't have to pay tariffs, and I guess I'm being misinformed.
Pardon me?
People keep saying I'm not going to have to pay tariffs, and I think I'm being misinformed on
You're talking about the USMCA pause there?
Yes.
No.
So that is, I don't know how much you want to get into trade discussions here, but just to say that that will cover, it's estimated, between 40 to 60% of the trade from Canada is covered by the USMCA exemption. There's still another 40% that will be tariffed immediately. And the pause is only until April right now. And so as you think about, this is just an example here, but like, what are you talking about fundamentally? You're talking about understanding across the multiple steps as you add value, understanding those costs, and then understanding how you're going to design a food supply chain in that world. And it's about tariffs. It's about disruptions from geopolitical events. I mean, we analyzed after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the disruption of food supplies was severe. And Ukraine supplies a lot of not just Europe, but also Africa. And so we were able to look at the impacts of that at an aggregate, but also a disaggregate level. The same thing is true of tariffs.
Yeah. So how do you all factor that in, where suddenly the price of an input could be 10% more than it was a month ago, where usually that might be a little more of a gradual change?
Yeah, I think, this is also the reason now it's a crazy world out there. It's also great timing for people to see the value of AI, because AI be able to capture all these variation factors and also model them in very, very quickly. It's just one of the key metrics we need to keep tracking. And another thing is essentially not only mention like a large language model, we have lots of discussion about generative AI, but in general, the fundamental rule-based machine learning, finding correlation of one over another, that's already very good enough for the food supply chain or global supply chain prediction, and also making last-minute changes and making prediction, inventory management, everything. That's only be possible by leveraging AI. Of course, another thing is I think everyone would model it into different percentage. Okay, it's 10% impact or 20% impact, and what is the potential projection for the next 1 month or so? We'll see remain the same or different. I think we have to keep a very open, dynamic production line in order to do so, because the things won't be consistent, and we're gonna see lots of changes even in the next couple of days. Consider what's happening to the public market right now, and you will find a very interesting correlation across one of another, and the geopolitical issue globally also have impact. Peter just mentioned about all this correlation. Another thing also Peter mentioned earlier, we discussed offline, is about how many of the other industries rely on the food, for example, chemistry and also other industries. So yeah, the influence and also the result correlation might be bigger than we expected. So which is calling for even more urgent of integration of AI.
And if I might just jump in, I think we've both touched upon this a lot, but having a source of truth that is with an evidentiary basis is so key when things change. If you're just out there doing naive modeling, then A, it's not defensible probably, but B, it actually won't be able to handle a question like tariffs or a dramatic change. Whereas I think what we're all working on is systems that actually understand the fundamentals. And from this, you can then run different scenarios.
Be able to really price in all different factors. You know, when we talk about tariffs, another thing we should always consider is really the currency. Like what is the currency ratio? What is the stand of the dollars compared with other countries' currency? And then factor that in, then later we'll know how much actual, US have to pay for all this changing policy right now.
I got to wrap up with one quick service journalism question. Will AI make the price of eggs any cheaper anytime soon? Yes, no.
Yes.
Yes, no?
No.
Oh, come on. You're building the solution.
Yeah, okay. If AI finds a reason, finds a cure to that kind of virus going around, then indirectly maybe yes.
Okay, Lou, you get to break the tie.
I think it's also no. Shop your time, no.
Sorry, folks, we can't solve that, but I hope at least this discussion made you hungry. Go out and eat something. Thank you, everybody.